I started school at Washington, grade school.
Okay.
And my 6th grade at Washington, it was overcrowded. So they took half of the class at Washington, and we had a room down in the junior high school, down in the, what we call the basement. It was the first floor over on the west side. John Shoemaker was the principal of the junior high at the time, and his wife, Mrs. Shoemaker, was our teacher, and we went the whole 6th grade year there. So I really had 4 years in that junior high building. I refer to the junior high building as the north part of the building as it is today. I had a saxophone. I played in the band. And I remember all the basketball games that were, you know, the gym where they played basketball was back of the auditorium between the junior high and the high school. As I said, my father had a men's clothing store, and there was a soldier at Fort Sill that apparently was in the band, or else he had a saxophone, but he didn't have any money to buy a suit. Now this is all during the Depression.
Right.
And so my father made a deal with him. He'd give him a new suit for his saxophone, and that's how I got my saxophone. Then I took lessons from Phil Cato, the band director. In my own little dance band that I played with, we played out at Medicine Park at the Apache Inn and the Medicine Park Hotel. During the Depression, which we didn't have any money in our family, my father lost his store, and that's when the Sheplers lived right next door to us or in the same block. And I think they arranged that I got a good paper out. It was one of the best in town.
Wow.
And I delivered that same route for 7 years, from 1930 through my first year at Cameron.
Very good.
I had a bicycle because we didn't have cars much in those days. We rode bicycles. And I remember delivering papers during the big dust storms we'd have in the 30s and all of that. It was such a nice route because it was in the part of town that was established, and there were some stores. I delivered to the courthouse and used to go up, and actually some people, in those days I could walk right up to the bars of the jail, and if a prisoner wanted to buy a paper, he'd give me a nickel, and I'd hand him a paper through the bars.
Oh my gosh.
They didn't seem to worry much about anybody escaping, I guess.
Security was not a problem. Now, do you remember the dress code or the style of clothes that people wore during those years?
I think we just wore about anything. The only picture I remember, and I was embarrassed when I was always a child, was at Washington, and my mother had me on. I had knickers on and a little suit, and Claire Morford was another one that had knickers, but somebody else right next to you had on a pair of old overalls, and they wore everything. But they were all my friends. James Ost was going with a girl. And in those days, of course, you didn't have cell phones or anything.
No.
So they'd write notes, you know. Well, I was in the class with his girlfriend, so during the noon hour, he says, give this note to this girl. I said, okay. Well, it was in Mrs. Fox's class. And she saw this note thing, and I guess she knew what was going on. So she took it from me, put it in her pocket. And I thought, well, I'm in trouble now with my friend James Aust. So after class, when I got another friend of mine to ask her about a problem that we were having, and I thought I could see this note in her pocket right there. It was partly sticking out. So I slipped it out, put it in my pocket, and went to my Latin class. I was doing a favor for my friend to get his note back, see. Well, about 10 minutes after the class started in Latin, Mr. Becker, the principal, knocked on the door and he says, "Is Charles Graybill in this class?" And yes, I didn't know what it was. He took me out in the hall and he said, "You know, Mrs. Fox had her paycheck stolen. Someone took it out of her pocket." And see, unbeknown to me, I hadn't even looked. I said, "I don't know anything about that." And I reached in my pocket and pulled this out. And, well, I don't have it. And I told him the story. And I got sent to his office and a few spats, and he told me he was going to talk to B.C. Sweeney about this. Now, how she knew, but later she was a good friend of mine, and later she laughed about this, how I stole her paycheck. And really, I thought it was the note, and it was her check that I'd taken out, see.
Oh, it was?
I thought it was the note that James Aust had given me to give to his girl. I just saw a piece of paper and I pulled it out. But when I got it out, it was her paycheck, see? So I was caught. And in 1980, I was made chairman of the McMahon Foundation. I've been chairman now for 30 years or 31 years. I wanted from the beginning to preserve the Lawton High School building. And from a structural standpoint, it's structurally sound, better than a lot of buildings that we've built in the last 50 years, and it's 100 years old.
Right.
It'll probably be there another 100 years, because
Right.
it's not going to just fall down. So.
No.